What's going on, guys? It's Brandon back here again. October 3rd, 2023. It is National Boyfriend Day, aka a holiday that I will not be celebrating with anyone. It's also National Mean Girls Day, which seems to go hand in hand. Um, Never seen that show either. However, on a more exciting note, two very, very fun birthdays today. As one of the greatest soccer players of all time and potentially a god, Zlatan Ibrahimovic celebrates his birthday, as well as ASAP Rocky, that pretty motherfucker, as he likes to say. So big happy birthdays to Zlatan and ASAP Rocky. Um, we're here, like I said, it's Tuesday, October 3rd. We had a great weekend. Friday night, I got to meet Taylor Luan and Will Compton of Bussin' with the Boys from Barstool. Good to meet them. I was going to go check out the Nebraska basketball scrimmage, except they didn't scrimmage. They just warmed up, so that kind of was a disappointment. But it was a pretty fun weekend. Obviously, Nebraska took on Michigan this weekend. Nebraska got absolutely pounded, so no need to talk about that. However, in the rest of the college football world, we did pretty well with our bets again this weekend. We went 3-2. However, due to our South Florida money line, they were dogs. We were able to come up positive on the weekend for units. We are sitting total of 9 wins, 3 losses for a positive return of 8.79 units. The three winners we had obviously were UCF money line. That's a huge one. I've been really hot with the underdog money lines in college football so far this year. And then we also had Air Force -10. They took care of business, won by 39. Texas State -5.5. They won by 14. Unfortunately, our NFL, we went 0-2 again. Um, we are now 4-6 on the year for a loss of 2.43 units. Man, I tell you what, it's been a tough road so far with the NFL. It's been real hard to predict how things are going to go, and I think a lot of that is because so many teams throughout the league have just garbage offensive lines. Um, Not going to call out any specific players or anything like that. I'm not Rodney Harrison. However, I just think that across the league, offensive line play is down, and you see that with some of the performances, both by offenses and by some specific defensive players. Um, but moving into this past Sunday's games, we teed off with a nice early game in London as the Atlanta Falcons were defeated by the Jacksonville Jaguars 23-7. I hope you guys watched a little bit of this game in Andy's room. It was a little feature they had on ESPN Plus. It was like virtualized to look like toys to recreate what was actually going on. It was kind of cool to watch for a little bit, but overall, I just preferred the regular game. The Falcons kind of have an issue going on there. Desmond Ritter was not super great. He was 19 for 31, 191 yards, one touchdown to two interceptions. The big issue with those numbers is you look his main receiving options. Drake London only had 3 catches for 28 yards. Kyle Pitts, 2 catches for 21 yards. Those are two guys that have to be more active in the passing game. They were both first round picks. They're both great athletes. They need to be utilized more. However, another one of their first round picks, the one from this year, Bijan Robinson, played relatively well. He had 14 carries for 105 yards. I had a nice little ankle breaker on one of the Jaguars players towards the beginning of the game. But that obviously wasn't enough. Jacksonville rebounded well coming off their loss to Houston. Trevor Lawrence looked good again, 23 of 30, 207 yards and a touchdown. That touchdown was to Calvin Ridley. He had 2 catches for 38 yards. Christian Kirk had 8 catches for 84 yards. And then Travis Etienne got 20 carries, only was able to get 55 yards out of that. Um, However, I think the Falcons need to make a change at quarterback. I think it's time to move on to Taylor Heineke. He's not an elite quarterback by any means, but he's also not afraid to take some risks. When he was in Washington, you saw what he was able to work with Terry McLaurin. And I think, having a little bit of that YOLO attitude, just trying to get the ball to his best playmakers, is kind of what Atlanta needs to do at this point because they desperately need to get Pitts and London rolling, especially Kyle Pitts. He has potential to be one of the best tight ends in the league if he's utilized correctly. He's just such an athletic freak, such a specimen. He has great speed. They just need to figure out how to get those two guys involved. Carrying on through some of the other games in the league, we had a great, exciting game in the AFC East as the Buffalo Bills knocked off the Miami Dolphins by a score of 48-20. Both of those teams are now 3-1 on the year. It was an exciting game. Obviously, the Dolphins put up 70 points a week ago against the Broncos, and the Bills come back and put 48 up on them. Um, Tua wasn't super bad by any means. He was 25 of 35 for 282 yards, one touchdown, one interception. It was another good game on the ground for Devon Achan. He had 8 carries for 101 yards and two touchdowns. And then obviously they were able to find Tyreek and Waddle a few times. Tyreek 3 catches for 58 yards, Waddle 4 catches for 46 yards. Story of the game is what Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs were able to do for that Bills offense. Obviously, the Bills have never really had a great running attack, and that continues so far into this season. But it doesn't matter when, Josh Allen can go 21 of 25, 320 yards, 4 touchdowns, 0 picks. He was able to find Diggs quite a bit. He had 6 catches, 120 yards, 3 touchdowns. And it just kind of showed that those two teams really have a lot of offensive firepower throughout. Unfortunately for the Bills, Tre'Davious White looks like he's got a torn Achilles, will be out for the rest of the year. Huge blow to the secondary of the Bills. They're already one of the most talented secondaries in the league when you think of Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer. And then to lose Tre'Davious White, your main corner, it's a huge loss. Um, it might not hurt them now, but it's definitely going to hurt them as the season continues to go. These guys are going to have to match up with the Dolphins again at some point in this season. And if you're going to make a playoff run, you're going to see teams such as, the Dolphins as well as the Chiefs, and you have to shut down their passing game. And without your best corner, it's obviously easier said than done. Moving into what I like to call the dog shit bowl, the Denver Broncos stumbled their way into a victory, defeating the Bears 31-28. It's the first win of the season for the Denver Broncos, as the Bears are still sitting winless at 0-4. I thought Russell Wilson played well again. He's played well all season, actually. He was 21 of 28, 223 yards and 3 touchdowns. A lot of people like to throw shade at Russ due to some of the Broncos' failures this season. However, it's not been his fault, and I don't even necessarily think it's been Sean Payton's fault either. You look at Vance Joseph and that defense, and this Broncos defense is one of probably the worst defense in the league at the moment, which is a real shame because the Broncos defense was electric last year, and the main reason that they were able to somewhat stay in games for a little bit despite a pugnacious offense. Sertan hasn't quite looked the same. They're not really generating much passing pressure. It's been a real shame. But the main reason that the Broncos were able to get the dub in this game is because the Bears just absolutely crumbled as the game went along. The stat line should look good for Justin Fields: 28 for 35, 355 yards and 4 touchdowns. But then you also got to think about he threw a pick and also had a fumble that was returned for a touchdown. The Bears' offense did seem to be clicking. Khalil Herbert had 18 carries for 103 yards. DJ Moore had 8 catches for 131 yards and a touchdown. Cole Kmet had some nice chemistry going with Fields: 7 catches, 85 yards, 2 touchdowns. But like I said, all those numbers don't mean as much when you consider how bad the Broncos' defense is and the fact the Broncos still won. It's time to sound almost as many alarms as possible as you can in Chicago. Um, Man, they're terrible. Their offensive line's not very good. I don't think Justin Fields is very good. Their defense hasn't been very good. Um, you got to start wondering, are they in the Caleb Williams discussion? They have to be in the Marvin Harrison discussion, especially with Chase Claypool not working out. Looks like he's going to get traded. Maybe Joe Alt or Fashanu, the tackle from Penn State, could be guys to help Chicago, but they're in trouble, man. And shout out to Denver for getting their first win of the year. Shout out Russ. Like I said, he's played actually pretty well all season long. But yeah, both those teams have got to get their defense figured out if they want to make any more noise for the rest of the season. Um, Another really disappointing game was the Tennessee Titans absolutely crushed the Bengals. The Titans won 27-3. The Bengals are 1-3 on the year. Joe Burrow, 20 of 30, 65, 165 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. Uh, those are just not great numbers. I mean, yeah, he only had 10 incompletions, but 165 yards is something. You can't have numbers as low as that. Meanwhile, the Titans offense was able to do what it wanted. Tannehill had a good game, 18 of 25 for 240 yards with a touchdown pass. Derrick Henry on the ground, 22 carries, 122 yards, a touchdown. He also had a passing touchdown on a little jump pass near the goal line. You got to bench Joe Burrow. He's not healthy. That's what it's coming down to immediately. Is that Joe Burrow is not healthy. He cannot move in the pocket. He cannot make plays after the first 3 seconds or so in the pocket. If he has that much time, the O line has always been an issue for the Bengals. It's part of the reason people suggested taking Penny Sewell over Jamar Chase a couple of years ago. Jamar Chase didn't necessarily play bad. I believe he had 7 catches, but he was pretty upset in the media as he said he's always fucking open. Um, he might be right, but if Joe Burrow's not going to have enough time to get that ball thrown to him before he ends up in the dirt, doesn't really make a difference how open Jamar Chase is. I really do think the Bengals need to rest Joe Burrow at least another week or two and get him healthy. But when you're sitting at 1-3, you have no more room to play around with. Uh, they're on the verge of already being eliminated from playoff contention at this rate. They're in trouble. Really, there's no other way to say it. They're in trouble, and Joe Burrow's injury is a lot of that. Um, Another game, the Buccaneers were able to knock off the Saints by a score of 26-9. The Bucks are 3-1 on the year. The Saints are 2-2. This is one of my picks I had for the NFL slate that unfortunately let us down. I thought the Saints would play a lot better than this. The Buccaneers offense looked really good. Baker Mayfield, 25 of 32 for 246 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a pick. A lot of this was without Mike Evans. I believe he was knocked out of the game around the second quarter, maybe a little bit sooner than that. Um, the Saints defense was supposed to be pretty good. Numbers disagree with that. And the Saints offense was even worse. Derek Carr, 23 of 37, 127 yards, 0 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. He was averaging 3.4 yards per completion, which is like captain check down. They only had 197 total yards for the entire game, and they had 3 turnovers. Alvin Kamara came back this week. You still have Chris Olave. You still have Michael Thomas. Yet the Saints are one of 3 teams in the league to have yet put up 20 or more points in a game. And a lot of that's due to Derek Carr. Carr's just been timid, honestly. He's not really taking the deep shots. He's not really been able to find that mojo with his receivers. It hasn't been a great look for them, and that's a bad bet on my behalf. I'm going to own that one up and say the Saints defense was not as good as I thought they were, and the Bucks made that clearly a sign there. And then, of course, on Sunday Night Football, the Kansas City Chiefs were able to beat the New York Jets by a score of 23-20. Great game. I just want to throw that out there. This was a great game. Um, Zach Wilson's best game of his maybe career, but definitely of the season. 28 of 39, 245 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. He looked great. He was doing a great job of getting out of the pocket, extending plays with his legs, and finding last second throws. He looked he looked a lot better. Even Patrick Mahomes said that he thought he looked good. Pat, on the other hand, was 18 of 30 for 203 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. Isaiah Pacheco had a nice day on the ground, 20 carries, 115 yards, 1 touchdown. And Travis Kelce also had 6 catches for 60 yards. But I mean, you look at that stat line for Pat and compare it to that stat line of Justin Fields, and I tell you, that is just a shocking thing. Not many people would have predicted that Zach Wilson would outduel Patrick Mahomes. In fact, Zach Wilson is the only opposing quarterback to have more completions, more passing yards, more passing touchdowns, and fewer interceptions than Patrick Mahomes in any start Mahomes has had, college or pro. That's 127 games, including the postseason. So yeah, Wilson truly outdueled Pat when it came down to it, and for the Jets defense supposedly being very let down by Wilson and complaining that he can't win them games despite what the defense has done. I think it was the other way around this game as the defense let down Zach Wilson. Some other noteworthy things that happened around the league. Puka Nakua had 9 catches for 163 yards and a walk-off overtime touchdown as the Rams knocked off the Colts in overtime. He set an NFL record for most catches through first 4 games of an NFL career. He had 39, breaking the previous record of Anquan Bolden. The Eagles knocked off the Commanders in overtime. It looks like the Commanders may have the Eagles' number. They were able to knock them off last year. And obviously they played them real tough so far this year, took them to overtime. Vikings fell into their first win of the year. That was another bad bet on my behalf, although it wasn't as bad as I expected. The Panthers were certainly in it. They made a drive late and ultimately just failed on fourth down in the red zone. If they would have kicked the field goal in that moment, they would have covered to win our bet, although you played for the win, not for the cover. The only reason the Vikings were able to get it done is due to a fumble that was returned for a touchdown for the Vikings. That was the main thing that got them done. You look at that Steelers game. Kenny Pickett got hurt. Sounds like he's might just going to be week to week. He should hopefully be a little bit fine. However, on the other side of that, C.J. Stroud is playing like a true MVP quarterback thus far. So far in the year, he's 94 for 151 yards, or excuse me, 94 completions out of 151 attempts for 1,212 yards, 6 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. He's had a real nice connection going with Nico Collins. Ultimately, the Texans just look like a real good football team. The decision-making process for Stroud has been good, and it's been quick. He's been able to read the defenses really quickly and make the right throw. He's been using his eyes to mislead defenses to complete passes. He's been fantastic, and I'm going to be really excited to watch the Texans throughout the season as Stroud continues to get even better, if that's possible. The New England Patriots, absolutely terrible. This is by far the worst Bill Belichick team he's ever had. They got absolutely slammed. The Cowboys took care of business there. The defense looked especially good as well. The Chargers started off hot against the Aiden O'Connell led Raiders. However, that game ended up being a lot closer than it probably should be, especially when you consider the fact that Khalil Mack had 6 sacks on the night. And speaking of sacks, last night's Monday night football game was a very uneventful one to talk about. Besides the 11 sacks that Seattle were able to land on Giants quarterback Daniel Jones, I gotta feel terrible for Daniel Jones. I mean, he was having like a second at most. It felt like for every single play, couldn't even get quick screens or slants off before getting thrown in the dirt. Rookie Devon Witherspoon out of Illinois had a great game. Um, this Seattle team, I love, man. I've said this for weeks now. I love this Seattle team. Geno Smith got hurt for a little bit, came back. He didn't have his best game, but he didn't need to. The ground game was working really well between Jacques Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker. That Seattle defense, man, like I said, you get 11 sacks. There's not much to complain about there. But then when you think about the performance of guys in the secondary, Tariq Woolen, Devon Witherspoon, Jamal Adams came back, got a concussion, and left again early, but he's still relatively healthy in terms of what he is dealing with his body, not necessarily his brain. I'll be excited to see this Seattle team at full strength, especially when you consider how successful and smart of a coach they have in Pete Carroll. So yeah, those were some of the big noteworthy stories from around the NFL on that. Um, Ultimately, hopefully, this week kind of gave us a little bit more clarity on what to expect for the upcoming weeks. Maybe a little bit better of a tell of what we think we're going to see out of Baltimore. Maybe a little bit more better of a sign out of Cleveland. Um, Cleveland didn't have Deshaun Watson this week. They had Dorian Thompson Robinson. He was okay, not nearly quite the level that Deshaun Watson usually plays at. Um, the Lions obviously got it done on Thursday Night Football with a big win over the Packers. They look to control the NFC North at the moment. The 49ers had a little bit of a tough game against the Cardinals, but they still got the job done. Josh Dobbs probably playing better than most people expected at this point. The Cardinals showing a bit more fight than people expected at this point. I think they were kind of viewed as a team that's going to be the worst in the league. Probably a first round or first overall pick potential. Looks like that's not going to happen at all. And yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what we can figure out for the rest of the season. The Rams, still trying to figure out how I view them. They were able to knock off Seattle week one, got the job done against Indianapolis this week. Indianapolis has been another team that's had some highs and lows. Uh, but I'm telling you, I'm going to come back this week with my best NFL slate yet, and that's a guarantee. I will absolutely dive into so much research to give you guys some winners for the NFL this week. Obviously, as you can tell by our show, we have a lot more interest in talking about the NFL than we do with college football, but we haven't been betting them as well as we have college football. Speaking on college football, Colorado USC missed that bet. They clearly went over, but that was a great game. Shador Sanders and Caleb Williams were going head to head. You could tell that as the fourth quarter was getting there, the USC team was getting a lot more tired due to that elevation, and that Colorado team was able to make it more of a close game. So that was a lot of fun there. The Notre Dame Duke game was a lot of fun as well. I thought Sam Hartman looked good. I'm hoping that Riley Leonard is okay for Duke. He's been playing well for them at quarterback, and I know Duke fans are ultimately excited to have a good football team. Usually, there have been a basketball school. Um, some other just small things that are going around the sports world right now. The Blazers flipped on Drew Holiday over to the Boston Celtics. I think Boston had a huge overpay. They sent Malcolm Brogdon, Robert Williams, and a couple first round picks back to the Blazers. You look at the Blazers, man, they're cooking what they're doing right now. They were able to bring in Rob Williams and DeAndre Ayton to improve their center depth. They're both much better players than what they had in Yusuf Nurkic. They have the young guards, Shaden Sharp, Anthony Simon, and then they recently drafted Scoot Henderson. I would assume that Malcolm Brogdon will get moved on. I know the Clippers have had some interest in the past. Um, Depending on what happens with James Harden, he could be a Harden replacement over there. You could maybe see a three-team trade that sends, Brogdon to the Sixers, Harden to the Clippers, and then some combination of, I don't know, Marcus Morris, Amir Coffey, Norman Powell, Robert Covington, picks, something like that, moved on to the Blazers. But the Blazers' return for Dame has been absolutely solid. Um, Canelo got an easy win over Jermaine Charlo on boxing on Saturday night. He's an absolute stud, one of the best boxers of all time. Not really sure what's next for him. Charlo didn't really put up much of a fight in that one at all. There's kind of been some discussion if Bud Crawford's next there. I personally hope not. Bud's a little bit too small for Canelo. There's a reason those weight classes are different. Um, no UFC over the weekend. However, we do have a fun card coming up this Saturday that is headlined by Grant Dawson and Bobby King Green. We got the baseball playoffs starting today. Unfortunately, I have not followed baseball as much as I usually have in years past. Um, I don't know, just part of it was due to the Royals not being as good as usual. Um, but the Rangers will play the Rays, the Blue Jays will play the Twins, the Diamondbacks have the Brewers, and the Marlins have the Phillies. Um, I guess I'll just say I hope the Phillies overall win the World Series. I'm not really a Philadelphia guy, but I do like a lot of the players on the Phillies. I love Bryce Harper. If you don't like Bryce Harper, you don't like baseball. He's so entertaining, and he loves the sport, and I think that's one of my favorite things about him. And then obviously Nick Castellanos is a fun player to watch as well. But this Philly team, they have a lot of power. You look at Kyle Schwarber. He's another guy that can absolutely just nuke the baseball. And then, their pitching staff with Aaron Nola and Zach Wheeler. They were in the World Series last year, couldn't get it done. I'm rooting for them to get it done this year. Um, I don't think the Brewers or Diamondbacks have what it takes. However, I like to see the Diamondbacks made the playoffs. They're a very young team, so getting to see some of these young guys get playoff experience will be a nice thing, and hopefully it goes a long ways in continuing the Diamondbacks as a threat for multiple years to come. Um, Champions League. The second group games of Champions League are today and tomorrow. Napoli and Real Madrid play at 2 o'clock. That will be an exciting game. Napoli hasn't played as well as they did last year, but it's still a game that I'll be looking forward to. My Manchester United Red Devils have Galatasaray today, and you had an embarrassing loss to Crystal Palace over the weekend that I don't feel great about. Um, Bayern Munich's obviously in action against Copenhagen. PSV Sevilla will be an interesting game, as will Inter Milan and Benfica. You move on to the games tomorrow. Um, Newcastle, PSG, as well as Dortmund and AC Milan in that group of death. No idea how either of those two games will turn out. Leipzig and Man City play again. I feel like they play every single Champions League. Um, Celtic and Lazio might be another good game in over there as well. And then, before we know it, we're back to Thursday. We have another Thursday night football game. Bears Commanders. I know that one just absolutely gets everyone going there. Uh, should be a Commanders win, but I will preview that one hopefully a little bit earlier or sometime this week. If not, if I don't get an episode out before that game, uh, assume the Commanders win that and assume the Commanders cover. Sam Howell, actually a pretty decent quarterback, all things considered. Um, not a top 10 at quarterback or anything, but you could have a lot worse out there. So that's kind of what's been going on out there. I don't know what's been going on with you guys. I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe, share this with your friends. Um, Hopefully, have some exciting stuff coming up later this week. I'm trying to get as many other people on as I can. Um, Talk NFL, talk college football, UFC. Unfortunately, we got to keep talking about Taylor Swift as long as that's still in the media circuit. Kind of a bummer to me that she's not going to be the Super Bowl halftime for all the attention we're giving her. But that's kind of what's been going on there. In terms of my life, um, not a whole lot's new quite yet. Might try to put out a couple miscellaneous videos over the next couple weeks that aren't necessarily podcast related, but maybe more so zoned in on a specific topic. Things such as top UFC prospects have kind of been crossed in my mind, as well as maybe some potential NBA trades I'd like to see, stuff like that. Um, yeah, ultimately, that's kind of all I have going for you guys. The Huskers play on Friday at Illinois. We'll lose that game, I'm sure. Most of my sports teams absolutely suck at the moment. So, it's hard for me to maintain my smile, but here I am and I'm doing it, getting it done. So, how about that? So, I hope you guys have a great beginning of your week, carrying over into the end of your week. Like I said, I will definitely have a video out on Friday detailing our college football bets and as well as our NFL bets. I've told you before, I'll tell you again, I'm guaranteeing a winning week in NFL this week, and that's without me even quite looking at the spreads and lines yet. I'm gonna hit it as hard as possible to regain your guys' trust in that, and I hope you guys continue to tail me in college football, especially when it comes to my underdog money lines. I've been red hot with those. So remember, guys, stay blessed.